First guest of the week, first guest this morning, John McKay joins us. He is president and CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association. If you want to follow John on X, you can do so at MCKAY. That's McKay_MMA. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Richard. How are you, man?
Doing well. Really appreciate some of your time this morning. I know Lance was giving you a hard time. He said all that behind you. I see a lot of stacks on the desk. Looks like there's plenty of work on a Monday morning.
Well, there's plenty of work. I would rather talk about how Ole Miss hadn't really gotten a complete game of football in this season, but I guess we can talk about manufacturing if we need.
They're saving it all for November 9th.
That's what I hear.
Which they're going to need. They're going to need when Georgia rolls into town. Got certainly a big test on the road against Arkansas this weekend as well. But, yeah, we might spend a little more time on that this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Yep. Maybe you can join us then as well.
I'll tune in.
What's going on at MMA right now?
Well, things are going good. I mean, generally, manufacturing, especially in Mississippi, is on the upswing. I mean, you've got Governor Reeves and Bill Cork and his team over at MDA doing a fantastic job. So you've got, the exciting projects that have been announced over the past handful of months. Big aluminum plant over in Columbus, and you've got the battery plant up in the northern part of the state. And so things are rolling along. I think what you see right now in the numbers, just in the economic data for manufacturing is, and it's kind of this way across the economy, is everybody's kind of in a holding pattern, waiting to see what happens next week. And that's just the facts. And we need most of the businesses around the state and around the country are looking for some certainty as they make those longer term plans and investments. So things are just kind of cool right now. And you would think that depending on how next week goes, you'll see some action, some uptick.
I think there are two topics in this presidential election cycle that really grab the attention of owners of big businesses, certainly of manufacturing businesses. One is corporate tax rate, and the other is tariffs. And let's tackle the second one first, because there are a lot of people that hear tariffs and they think, oh, that's a bad word. And as Donald Trump explains tariffs and the role that they can play kind of in the global landscape, he talks about those as a massive win for American businesses, particularly in the manufacturing space. So as you talk to leaders within your space here in Mississippi, what's their reaction when they hear tariffs?
So it's a really good question, and it is very complicated because you do have bad actors internationally that exploit their resources and their people and just drive the cost of a product down so that they can corner the market. And we need to be very diligent about that. But in general, I will say that the global economy is so intertwined that instituting tariffs, especially blanket tariffs, just in one direction at a high level, you really start to skew the market in ways that most people don't even think about. So, for example, we have a lot of smaller manufacturers in Mississippi that are component part manufacturers. And so you might have a product that's 70% manufactured overseas, brought over here for finishing or final components or things like that. Or there's a large component of a final product that's produced here in Mississippi that's shipped overseas, installed, and then sold around the globe. So in general, we would like to see more cooperation on the international stage with international trade. It just benefits everybody. Now, totally understand when things need to happen and countries need to be brought to account for bad acts. And you've seen that. And I think that's why you've seen the Biden administration continue the tariffs of the Trump administration, because some of those were good policies and led to domestic industries benefiting. But it's a very complicated, you need to be very careful how you implement some tariffs.
When you hear Donald Trump talk about tariffs, do you think this is something that he views as a tool in his toolbox for negotiating and trying to get international manufacturers and foreign countries to play a game that is more fair, or do you think he genuinely intends to plug tariffs in that would restrict some of the trade you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously it's campaign season, as you guys know, and sometimes the rhetoric is hard to square with what past actions and what you think they might actually institute. I will say that over his first 4-year term, he worked very well with our National Association of Manufacturers on these exact type of issues. If you'll remember, when he came in, he was very much against NAFTA and the framework that the NAFTA deal that was put in place 20, 30 years ago had for the United States. And he blew it up. And he worked with our people in D.C. and other business organizations and came up with a great deal that's now in place. And that's going to have to be revisited at some point. So I think that as his background in business, he understands that sometimes you need to heat up the rhetoric a little bit in order to get that negotiation where it should be. So I trust that we won't go too far in either direction.
So what about the second piece of what I mentioned a second ago, the corporate tax rate, which prior to Donald Trump under the Obama administration was up around, I may be off a little bit, but was up in the neighborhood of 40%. It came down into the low 20s under the Trump presidency. He said in an interview it was part of the conversation with Joe Rogan over the weekend that they want to get that down closer to 15%. How much does that affect manufacturing business specifically in Mississippi?
It's hard to say specifically for Mississippi, but in general, absolutely affects manufacturing because, again, this is a global economy. There are very few manufacturers that are isolated to certainly a state or even a region. I mean, almost everybody trades nationally and most even trade internationally, especially our American neighbors. So Canada, Mexico, even South America. Those are huge markets for folks in Mississippi. So I think what's interesting about this conversation is the corporate tax rate is very important, but there were a lot of other smaller tax issues embedded in Trump's plan when he passed it 4 years ago. So there's a research and development tax credit. There's accelerated depreciation, and all of those things are tied in to the overall plan, and they all expire over the next year or two. And so that's hugely beneficial.
One of the other things, and I guess I probably should have mentioned this when I said, tax rate, tariffs, the regulatory environment is another thing that Trump has talked about a lot. And he recently said in an interview that, when asking some business leaders, hey, what's more important, tax rates or backing off some of the regulations and some of the red tape that's in place, they said without a doubt it's the regulatory environment and making that easier. How is that having an effect here?
Oh, it's a big weight. I will say that, and you can guess for manufacturing, some of the biggest areas of regulatory burden are going to come on the environmental side. So your EPA regulations, Department of Labor. Obviously, Biden has very much towed the line to his base in the organized labor community. And quite frankly, in Mississippi, we've had just a ton of success as a right-to-work state where that's just not a big issue. And the Department of Labor has come in and instituted all sorts of crazy rules and regs. I mean, we're fighting one in court right now with our National Association that would allow an outside observer to accompany OSHA inspectors to come in to a manufacturing facility. So you could draw a pretty quick line that you could have an organized labor representative accompanying these safety inspectors to come in and point out things that may not even be issues, but just somebody that's not even affiliated with the company, not an employee, not even a representative of the employees. I mean, it's that kind of stuff that as a business owner, you just shake your head and say, what's the goal here? What are we trying? This isn't about safety. This is about organized labor. And those things really do stand out when you're trying to make a profit and really compete. Like I said, on a global scale, these are the last things you need to be worried about, and they just seem very superficial.
Visiting with John McKay. He's president and CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association. You got time to hang with us for just a few more minutes after the break?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll do that. We'll continue the conversation with John McCain. Not John McCain. With John McKay, president and CEO at MMA. What is it that makes Mississippi so attractive to manufacturing organizations, companies that are coming into the state? And are there any projects that we need to know about that might be coming online soon that he's able to talk about that? We'll do that coming up next. This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. We're back with you right after this. On Thursday morning this week, the Gallo Radio Show will be at the Mississippi Coliseum for the annual Hobnob. It's hosted by the Mississippi Economic Council. Hear from political leaders, experience a day of networking, plus some great food. To learn more or to register for the event, go to mec.ms. John, you going to be there for Hobnob coming up later this week? Maybe.
I will be there, taking in all the sights.
There you go. Certainly going to be a big deal. So I mentioned this before the break, and some of this I think you've answered in some of your other answers. But what is it that, as we sit here currently, makes Mississippi so attractive to businesses who are looking to, in a lot of cases, relocate to Mississippi?
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the things, and it's certainly something that MMA has been on the front lines of, is we are a business-friendly state. And so our political leaders and our policies and regulatory environment in Mississippi are just set up in a way to help businesses succeed. And obviously, when businesses can succeed, individuals around the state have jobs, they have money, they spend that money in our local economies. And so it really does work here. One of the things I've really been excited about over the last couple of years is we've really, we've kind of put our money where our mouth is in investing in things of high value in the state. And so in my mind, if we as a state can do anything, it is plow money into workforce development. And that includes K-12 education, because we quickly realized that you can't just start looking at individuals when they graduate from high school and try to make them into a workforce ready group of folks. You need to start way earlier than that. And then investing in our infrastructure. We've gone over several years now where we've really put a lot of money into infrastructure work. I know there's an exciting project coming to the Oxford area up in your neck of the woods, and all of those kind of things where we can invest in ourselves, essentially. And these are core functions of government anyway. So really putting that money into our people and our infrastructure. And then look, companies these days, when they look to a state to maybe locate or expand, they're looking for development-ready sites. That's even, in some cases, moved ahead of workforce talent. Now, they have to have the workforce, and luckily we have a good stable of strong workforce talent in Mississippi. But companies want to be able to break ground and start making product in the shortest amount of time. They're ready to make money. And Mississippi has a lot of sites around the state that fit that bill. And that's important.
When you say infrastructure, we're talking roads, bridges, water, electric, and broadband?
Absolutely, all the above, and as much investment in all the above as possible. I'm actually the chairman of what is known as the Strategic Multimodal Fund in Mississippi. So I have the pleasure of representing some of the modes of transportation that often don't get thought about, like rail, ports, airports, and work with those communities to try to leverage some state funding, which we traditionally have not invested heavily in the other modes of transportation, but leverage some small state funds into massive federal funds that are 3 to 1. 3 or 4 to 1 matches in those areas. So we need to absolutely keep investing in the roads and bridges around the state, but don't forget those others, because it's all connected, and we need to keep investing.
John, last thing for you. We spend so much time focusing on the big projects, the major projects, and you mentioned some of those at the outset, and those are phenomenal, and they certainly grab the headlines. But what about some of the smaller projects, the companies who are going to employ 20 or 50 or maybe 100, and the role that those play within the manufacturing space in Mississippi?
No, that's a great question. And I often, obviously I represent hundreds of companies all around the state, and the majority of them are small to mid-sized manufacturers. And they often look up and say, what about me? I've been here for 50 years and I'm not getting all this money that these new developments are getting. And that's why it's so key. And setting up the strong business climate that we have on the tax and regulatory side definitely helps. But there's phenomenal local developers in this state that have programs, and obviously MDA steps up to the plate. But to your point, those 20 new jobs, let's say it's an expansion of a facility in a smaller rural town, those 20 new jobs are probably some of the highest paid, best benefit jobs in that area. And those are incredibly important. And so I'm always looking for, companies that are looking for that space. And we actually have a federal program that here at the association that helps those types of companies. And it works with our university system and our community colleges that have that expertise to go in and help them get ready for those expansion projects.
Yeah. A lot of good stuff going on in the manufacturing space here in the Magnolia State. John, really appreciate your time this morning. Good catching up, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
See you soon, Richard. Thanks.
John McKay, President, CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association. A lot of good stuff happening here in our home state of Mississippi and in our hometowns all across the Magnolia State. Alongside Lance Tolbert, I'm Richard Cross. We got the news coming up next, SuperTalk News and, of course, Fox News. JT Mitchell will join us later in the 8 o'clock hour to look at what happened over the weekend in the state and also look to the week ahead. Plus, we got more coming up with you. This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. We're back right after this.